Redditors who found out a close friend or family member was a sexual predator abuser. How did you find out and how did you handle the situation? I found out my ex-husband of 10 years was a pedophile when he impregnated his new girlfriend's 12 years old. I knew him 10 years prior to marrying him. You can absolutely not know. My god, this must have been traumatic to learn. I called the police immediately. I found a video from a hidden camera in our bathroom on my husband's tablet. The video showed my 14-year-old niece nude. I cooperated with police fully and they went on to find more images of my niece. My husband never came home again. I have only seen him in court since. I thought we had a strong marriage and he was a good man. Now, he's in prison and I'm figuring out single mom life. You're a dang strong woman for taking decisive action immediately. I can only imagine how difficult this must be, but you got this. I was raped and molested by a close family member. When I told my mother about it, she didn't believe me, so it continued for 5 years. He later went to prison for it and I haven't seen him in 20 years. I learned my grandfather was a pedophile immediately after he died. It wasn't a practical issue because he was dead. Emotionally, it was and is weird. I have zero bad memories of him, but I can also look back and realize that my parents were very careful that I was never alone with him. I found out my father had been molesting my sister for like 6 months. It was my birthday when I found out. I found out because she was crying instead of going to bed. Me being me, I wanted to make sure she was okay and see why she was crying. Well, after I found out, I immediately told my mom, who in turn told the police. I went out and stood in a blizzard in my pajamas. They divorced. He went to jail for a couple weeks, and she's had mental health problems ever since. A few family members have been very publicly shamed and charged with sexual misconduct. I have to avoid details because of Google, but after I gave an honest opinion to one of said family members, the rest of the family backed them up and thought I was out of line. More or less, I've become estranged. I've been there too. You're better off distancing yourself from that toxicity. Please get help if you need to. Remember, you didn't choose your relatives. You don't need that in your life. My cousin was molested by my uncle. I'm the only other person who knows besides my cousin's therapist. My uncle is a mess. His mom only hears from him when he wants money, but I guess no one's heard from him in a while. I hope he's dead. We learned after my cousin died, she was fighting brain and breast cancer for several years, that her husband would take advantage of her weakened state and force himself on her whenever he wanted. Needless to say, he was kicked off the farm she owned and ostracized from the family, and nobody ever speaks of him anymore. I felt awful that I didn't know he was taking advantage of her in the worst ways while she was dying. Somebody in our family obviously knew because she told somebody, but they didn't help. I can't help but feel so angry that she died miserable and not surrounded by loved ones. That's so heartbreaking. I had an old acquaintance who molested his younger sister. He said it was consensual, but nobody believes that. He called me late one night to ask to stay with me as he hid from police. I told him to frick off and never spoke to him again. He was in jail for a bit, but IDK if he's out anymore. Could have told him to come by and also told the cops you knew where he was. My grandfather was a pedophile, and I got caught in his web. My stepmother knew about it and still let me go over to his house. When I was a teen, he showed me hetero P, knowing it would have an effect. He did things to me that my confused teenage brain had trouble dealing with, but when he tried to anally rape me, it finally caused my fight or flight reflex to kick in. I did everything in my power to never see him again. When I found out later that my father had been subjected to the same abuse and that my mother and stepmother both knew what he was capable of, it caused years of alienation with both of them. It had caused me to question my own orientation, because what happened wasn't initially threatening, and the fact that my body responded. I thought for a time I might be gay. At 50, it still causes me bouts of anger, confusion, and doubt. Seek help if you have had anything happen to you that causes you strife mentally or physically. You are not alone. You are not going to be misunderstood. There have been too many of us with similar experiences, and we need to help each other. I will not post with a throwaway, because it is my reality, and shame is a tool used against us that I refuse to acknowledge. Shame is a tool used against us. Yes, this is so accurate. Thank you for letting your voice be heard. Oh, I can tell you from the perspective of the abused. I was molested when I was 11 by my uncle. I was also raped from 12 to 15 by his son. I reported them when I was 15. My aunt called me a W and said that I wanted it. The rest of my family found out pretty quickly and I became a social pariah. Nothing happened to any of them. She still stayed W and supported them, and the rest of my family hated me. Then when I was 19, my uncle attempted to sexually assault me again. Then when my aunt was yelling at me one day, I told her off for staying with a child molester and birthing a rapist. Needless to say, the only person I talk to is my grandma. Grandmas can be lifesavers. I'm so sorry your family continued to stay in denial, but I'm glad you had that one person in your family who still supported you. I hope you're doing okay. My cousin used to molest me. I was still a minor at the time and he wasn't. This kept on going for some months as far as I remember, and one day my dad caught him insisting on me and he punched him in the face and told him to never cross our paths again. Never seen him since. Good dad. Found out my uncle had been sexually abusing his daughter not that long ago. Didn't really know what to do honestly, besides removing him from all social media and from him being able to contact me. Craziest part was his wife knew for years, and she still wanted to be with him. It's disgusting how common it is for mothers to choose their marriage over their children. There's so many examples in this thread alone. When I was in high school, my friend group found out that someone we were close to had molested and raped his little sister, a couple grades below us. Because he got arrested for it, it apparently had been going on for months. We immediately disassociated with him and it was really horrifying to hear about, knowing how close we were with him. I think only one person remained friends with him and we don't really associate with him either. I don't know how she's doing now, but I really hope that she got the help she needed. Growing up, one of my friends was raped by her brother. I asked her about it and she said that she didn't count it as losing virginity. I was the same age as her and very ignorant about sex. She ended up getting taken away by social services. I hope she is okay today. Found out both my grandfathers on either side were pedophiles. My dad's dad used to molest all his boys and 3 out of 5 sons committed suicide. My dad included. My mom's dad had a kid with his own daughter and they put it up for adoption. My mom's dad used to bring her on fishing trips and molest her there. I'm not handling it the best, but my mom handled it all extremely well. How does one heal from this sort of stuff, anyway? I've got a much older cousin who my sister and I always thought was creepy. Only saw him a few times a year at family functions, but he always seemed way too interested in us considering the age gap, and just different from our other much older male cousins. Many years later, he ended up going to jail for molesting his stepdaughter. After he got out, he violated his parole by dating a teenage girl who was still a minor, and I believe went back to prison. Not a family member but a boss at a former job. He had been the editor of a local paper until it folded and had some recognition in the community. He attempted to meet up with 14-year-old girls in a motel. It was a police sting and he was busted. Found out because they published it all, including his picture in the competing paper. Makes you think about any interactions you've had with them. Something very similar happened with a local magazine in central Maine about 6 or 7 years ago. Absolutely wild. In this case, the publisher was caught in possession of child sexual abuse material. Dude was also a former city councilor. I have 2 of these unfortunately. My grandfather abused my aunt for years when she was a child. He tried to rape my mother as well. She says he didn't succeed, but I don't know that was true. It came out when I was a kid fighting with my mom. Bipolar disorder is hereditary in my family and I was having an episode. We were yelling at each other. I told her that I hated my life and she could never understand. Out of the blue she yelled, "Your father never tried to molest you." Everything stopped. It was like a slap across the face. I was so shocked. For the rest of his life I tried to avoid him and felt uncomfortable when I saw him. He had become a monster in the space of a minute. As I got older I learned more about it. My grandmother denied everything and told my aunt not to talk to about it. She refused to leave him. When my sister and I were born, my mom told them that they would never see us if he showed even the slightest hint of abusing us, be it beating us. He did that too. or touching us inappropriately. I'm surprised that she let them have any place in our lives at all. But she had loved her own grandparents so much that she just was so hopeful that they would change and we would get to have that relationship. The second time it came up in my life was with an ex's dad. My ex had 3 siblings, 1 full sister, and a half sister and half brother from his mother. It turned out that my ex's father had molested the half sister, his stepdaughter, for over a decade. The mother knew, but never did anything until the half sister outed him to the whole family. I found out about this shortly after the ex and I started dating because there was a family event where the half sister was going to be there and so his father was not allowed to come to, and it would be like that for everything. My ex swore that his dad would never do anything like that again. When I told him that if we had children they would never be allowed to be alone with his dad, he was upset and hurt by it. He looked up to his dad and couldn't see how that sort of thing isn't something you just forgive people for. The half-sister was so traumatized that the family had decided to forgive him and more or less sided with him instead of kicking him out and rallying around her. They thought they could forgive him and be on her side. I can't imagine how betrayed and isolated she must have felt. It made me sick to see him. In the end, it was one of the reasons I broke up with my ex. He just couldn't admit that there are some things people don't deserve forgiveness for. After the divorce, it emerged that my uncle abused his stepdaughter. I then made it my business to stalk him online every few months. When he became a physical therapist at a school, I emailed the head of the school with the story, with permission of my aunt and cousin, and he was terminated. I still search for him. I love people like you. My grandfather, not by blood but my dad's adopted dad, molested his young nieces and preteen girls at the Catholic school at which he was a principal. My dad molested women who worked for him. Happy to say my siblings are not continuing that toxic cycle. No one talks about it. My grandfather died when I was 10, and my dad had multiple strokes so wouldn't probably even remember it, but before that he was a narcissistic compulsive liar so wouldn't admit to it anyway. My uncle is alleged by his daughter and 2 of her friends to have sexually abused them all when they were around 8 or 9. The man has always been a C, but this pushed opinions over the edge because when the allegations were made nobody seemed surprised. My cousin is an alcoholic with some severe mental health issues who, because of her piece of crap father, is completely self-destructive. I have told my parents if when he gets in contact I would expect them to blank him completely. It's tough for my dad because he and Nancy uncle are closest in age of all his siblings, so we're close, or as close as you can be to a cancer on society. One day someone will tell me that he is dead and I will smile because the world will be a better place. One day someone will tell me that he is dead and I will smile because the world will be a better place. I remember this obituary. One person I took a bunch of swimming instructing life-saving courses with, and often was partnered with, almost 10 years later was busted for organizing the world's largest CSA site and had physically participated in such. Honestly, I felt dizzy and nauseous and nearly vomited when I found it all out. We were Facebook friends but didn't talk much outside of weekly classes. But those 4-hour-long classes are quite physical, meaning hands-on, doing carries, CPR training, spinal rollovers, etc. So yeah, he taught swimming lessons for years and that makes me sick too because it is very hands-on as well. I taught for many years and the little kids are always grabbing onto you and you have to hold them to show them how to float and stuff. I still struggle with it, wondering if I should have picked up on something when we were teenagers. Thankfully not directly related to this person. He was molesting his granddaughter. Unfortunately, due to worries about how his granddaughter's father might react, 100% would most likely kill the guy. Not many people know. The family has cut ties with him indefinitely. I wish they would file a report on him. Who knows who else he has, or may, abuse. You all should tell the dad and let him handle it as he pleases. My dad has been a registered sex offender since the mid-80s. I found out from his sister who told me, and also told me whom he molested. He went to jail and was raped over and over. They kept moving him around and the corrections officers told him to stand up for himself and to be a man. He never did. His mother would terrorize my mother and would shoot at her. My mom eventually moved us to South Carolina. We moved from New York. He still blames the victim for what happened, who was a child, and doesn't take responsibility even today. After I confronted him through text messages, he said I was cut off. as in he no longer talks to me. None of his children talk to him. He has various health issues and I think he's dying, but I'm not sure. It must have been difficult for you to deal. Hope you get proper help, and hats off to your mother for staying strong. One of my former best friends sexually assaulted our other friend. I wanted to put him into the ground for a decent amount of time. I have no contact with him anymore. I was the friend who was assaulted in a similar situation. I'll never forget how good it felt that I had people like you who went, you know what, frick you, and ousted instead of protected the assaulter. Using my throwaway, my paternal grandfather sexually abused my aunt for several years when she was younger. Not sure how old, I think somewhere in the 9-12 range. I found out after he died. My mother, consummate gaslighter that she is, made an offhand comment about it, and when I expressed shock, swore up and down that she had told me years ago. Obviously, she did not. I assumed that my dad had asked her not to say anything, and she let it slip. Anyway, I wasn't very close to him, but he was around for much of my life, passing away when I was about 18. The sad thing is, knowing what kind of man he was, it didn't surprise me. He was abusive to all 5 of the children, divorced his wife after 30 years, was an alcoholic and a gambler who was disbarred after embezzling tens of thousands from his law firm. It did explain a lot of the tension among my father and his siblings when it came to elder care for both my grandfather and grandmother. My dad effectively cared for them both, while the other 4 siblings refused to have anything to do with them. That's when I finally understood why. 2 of my best friends, brothers, were abused by their dad and uncle. Grade A pieces of crap. We were in the mid-90s playing on a roller hockey team together and got to know one another real well. We were your classic angsty teens and connected. We ended up being a defense pairing, and we would shut folks down. One weekend, we had the whole team stay the night post a win. 15 sweaty dudes throughout the house. God love my parents. They were great sports about it. The youngest of the brothers and I were passing the puck around and jumping the ramp we built that weekend, and he launches into it in a I need to say this kinda way. Man, this hit me hard. I was angry, confused, and then I just started crying and hugged him. We both just bawled for what seemed like an eternity, but likely just a couple of minutes. His dad was long gone by this time in his life and later went on to die, alone from what we found. The 2 brothers went on to make their life one that is polar to what experienced. We both just bawled for what seemed like an eternity. Terrible place to misspell bald. My uncle. He was more or less disowned when I was a teenager, but I didn't clock it until later. Basically, he was known for cheating on my aunt, and then one year at a family gathering he tried to assault my mum. My otherwise peaceful dad beat the crap out of him and threw him out the house. Had no idea because I wasn't there at the time and my parents kept it from me. I figured it was because he was a bad alcoholic. The uncle in question contacted me a few years back on FB, asking about why he was misunderstood. I told him to frick off. Sounds like he was actually well understood. Whenever I got to middle school, my mom told me my uncle had been seriously creeping on girls my age when he was a basketball coach. He was beat up by a parent and got serious death threats for years, which was why he had to move near us in the country. I never really spoke to him again. I haven't seen him in nearly 6 years now. Anytime I do see him I just look away. He was always in butthole, so it's fine. A few years ago it came out that my father had molested my cousin when she was 5 and living in our house. My father admitted and spent 3+ years in prison. I haven't spoken to him since. Since then my life has turned completely upside down. Demons I had conquered were once again banging on my door. I felt as though everything I had believed or learned in life was a lie. There have been other factors that rippled out from this event that have fed into my downward spiral. This was the tip. It's taken a long time for me to even realize that I have changed, not for the better. I'm really sorry this happened to you. I can't imagine it happening to me. I've always thought that if something like that did, I would completely break apart. I hope that you are helping yourself now. You've realized that you've changed, not for the better. That's the first step. Please don't let his legacy become yours. You don't deserve it. Grandpa, out hunting with my dad when he stopped the truck, turned to me and said, "You know your grandpa raped your mom and aunts, right?" I had a not now that and specified aunt. My sister told me that someone used to make her and our cousin do things when they were little. I can't look any of my aunts in the eye anymore. Dad, I read my mom's divorce journal once by mistake. Never again. This crap ends with me. We found out my dad had touched a few kids when he was arrested while we were all doing yard work. He was slated to conduct my sister's wedding a matter of months later. He just got released after a 13-year sentence. According to the victims, he never did anything but over the clothes stuff, but his youngest victim was like 4. Still makes me cringe to this day. He was good friends with most of the victims' parents' families. One of his victims' school counselors found out and reported him. The police came and searched the house for Kiddy P within a couple of days of his arrest. Most awkward hour of my life sitting in my living room with a cop staring at us while some other agents searched his office. I was molested by my brother. No one in the family knows. I thought my mom knew and just recently found out she didn't. Haven't really talked about it since. I definitely feel like I've always been off and never knew why. More recently I kind of had been looking back on my earlier life and think that could have fricked me up and I just didn't, or if this is the right place to say all that, but frick it, who cares. I had a pretty regular, nice guy as a coworker. Turned out to be a pedophile, actively snooping around playgrounds and stuff. I was quite shocked to know, albeit a coworker, he was still a good acquaintance. Never seen or talked to him since. He was jailed for a while. People presume that being a genuinely nice person is incompatible with also being a monster, but that is a shield that a lot of monsters hide behind. Getting on folks' good side so that they're better able to hide the unthinkably egregious stuff that they pull. I have had a few you think you know someone experiences in my life, and it makes it really hard to trust. Recently found out my uncle did stuff to my cousin. That uncle has always been suspicious. You'd greet him from the other side of the coffee table because he would try and kiss you on the mouth. But apparently he did much worse to my cousin. It's my dad's birthday soon and he will probably come over unannounced and uninvited. It's not my place to confront him, but I'll be wearing my steel-toed boots that day. I wish his cancer killed him. Not quite the same, but a very close family member is now dating and moved in with a man who went to jail for statutory rape. She doesn't have children. I'll get ahead of the comments to say that he was double his victim's age and in a position of authority. Absolutely not okay and no excuses for that. My family member is an adult. It's very clear to me that she's being manipulated by the excuses he's made for what he's done. But I have tried to the point that I had a breakdown to express my concerns about this relationship. She doesn't want to hear it. I'm struggling with the balance of concern for her and judgment of her for minimizing what he's done and the pain that has caused his victim and her family. I want a family someday and have been clear to my entire family that I will never allow this man in my life for the lives of my future children. Unfortunately, other family members don't quite see it the same way, which has put strain on other relationships. You do what's right for you and your own. They can go frick themselves. Oof, this is an uncomfortable one. Not a close friend, but a guy in my wider high school friendship circle raped a girl in my closer circle. I was very much in the margins at the time and not keeping up, but basically, no one believed her. People said it was just drama and chose to stay out of it, based on who they were and how they respectively described the event. He absolutely, 100% did rape her. When I was young, my mom told me that one of my uncles, the husband of my mom's sister, was a child molester and to never trust him. It was an open secret in the family that he molested all 3 of his children. We reported him to HRS, the predecessor of CPS here, multiple times, but nothing was ever done. He had complete control over that household for decades. My aunt never had independence. She grew up a Jehovah's Witness and married him before she went to work or college, and he made sure she had no concept of how to support herself and the kids without him working and running the home. The family tried over and over to get her to leave him. Once, before I was born, my grandmother saw him slap one of his own children as an infant. My grandmother was a large woman, over 6 feet tall, and she put him through the wall of her own home when she saw him do that. My aunt cleaned him up and they left together. She wouldn't testify against him ever, or acknowledge any of the abuse we knew took place to anyone. One time we came home from town to find him in our backyard. He was jerking our dog off, at like 3 in the afternoon. My mom and I saw it in time to redirect my brothers so they wouldn't see. My stepdad punched him and chased him off, and that was the last time I saw him. My aunt did finally leave him. The Jehovah's Witnesses got tired of her living with a husband who wouldn't be baptized JW and who still drank beer and smoked cigarettes, and gave her some kind of ultimatum, and she gave him the boot. She's struggled to get by ever since. She was near the normal retirement age when she joined the workforce for the first time. Only her oldest child has ever attempted to move out on their own. She lives 1,000 miles away and seems to have built a good life for herself. The middle child, the only boy, is about 40 years old now and will probably never move out. Whoa, that second to last paragraph really came out of nowhere. What a horrible man. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.